guys, thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of Tech Talk with Self Tech. I'm very happy to be introducing this first guest. This is a longtime friend, brother, cousin, family, whatever you want to call it. Blood wouldn't make us any thicker. This is Kenzley, and I'm gonna let Kenzley introduce himself. Kenzley, tell the people who you are.
Hello, people. My name is Kenzley. I am a software engineer on Google Docs. I've been at Google for about 9 years at this point. I think like last week just made it 9 years. So, yep. And I've done a bunch of like programming in my many years. Launched several projects related to Google Docs. Some things that you may not have ever heard of, but it helped, I guess, improve Google Docs over time.
Nice. But tell us a little bit more of like who you are, Kenzley. Like, what is it that you like? So you're a Google developer. So who is Kenzley? Like, what make Kenzley tick? And the reason I'm asking that is because I want the people to kind of get an insight on like the type of people that Google are hiring, right? Because if you would like watch like movies and stuff like that, it's like Google is either hiring like super geniuses or people who are like super weird and quirky smart. Like, so who is Kenzley and what is Kenzley into?
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I am not super smart like that. I think that there's like this internet perception of the type of people that Google hires, and most assuredly, like there are people there who are like brilliant, and I think they hire people with like different backgrounds. So it's just like, just to do a certain task, you need different to like build a company like Google. You need different types of people. You need people who are very like entrepreneurial. You need people who are like geniuses, but you also need people who like are very tech savvy, who know like the stack. So like I think there was like a movie called The Internship where it's
Yes,
like,
that's the movie I was referring to. Yes.
and then like I think that's what most people think about, where it's like this competition and everyone's from these schools, and it's like geniuses all throughout. But that's not necessarily the case. I think to run like a good company, you need people from different backgrounds. Like for me, I'm just like a regular person who grew up in Brooklyn. I went to public school in Brooklyn. I went to a public state college. I graduated with like computer science. I graduated with applied math. So for the most part, like I don't think I am extraordinary in the sense of like how when people think of like Google,
Mm-hmm.
like and like mind you though, like I know people at Google who have like PhDs in like physics and like math
Seriously?
and such. Yeah, some of my coworkers, yeah, they have PhDs in physics and they work on like the same thing that I work on. But it's just more like just Google hires just generalists. So it's just like there's so many different ways to tackle a problem, and Google needs, or at least any tech company generally needs like there's like different viewpoints essentially. So I think like I've done well at Google, and I'm pretty sure that having a different background, like you don't necessarily need to be a genius at an Ivy League school to be hired at Google.
So I got a few questions based off of that statement that you made. So my first statement would be, well, my first question would be to ask you, so what was your title or your role when you first got at Google, and what is your role now?
Uh, for the most part, I'm on what you call a software engineering ladder. So my title itself doesn't really change much. But when I first started, I was like a software engineer 3, and now I'm a software engineer 5. But it's like software engineer to senior software engineer. But that's essentially the title.
Okay, cool. Now you also mentioned how you're a regular guy, grew up in Brooklyn, of course, but I don't know how it was in Brooklyn because I wasn't there back then. By the time I was in Brooklyn, it was a different Brooklyn. But like for me, from Philadelphia, growing up, there was nobody really in. And granted, I went to a school that was based off technology, but technology wasn't really a cool thing. That's not what people sent their kids to school for, or that's not, especially in our culture, being Haitian. But most parents don't even care about, back then at least, didn't care about tech. Those want to, become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And I guess tech is close to that, but they didn't know that. An engineer for them is somebody who builds things in a physical form, right? So what is it about maybe your background, or what did you see growing up that made you want to like even get into tech? Because I got into tech years after you did, and we hung out all the time, and I never had an interest in tech until later on in life. So what made you want to get into tech?
Okay. Great question. The funny thing that you mentioned is, I think both of our parents can relate because they know each other. Is that every Haitian wanted to go into the medical field. Like that's what they encourage their children to do. Like my sister, a lot of my cousins,
Shout out to
they're
Ashley.
all yeah, and they're like she's a doctor. My cousins, they're like nurses and doctors, and like they're all in the medical field. I think for me, it's just like how what really sparked my interest in tech is like from my mom who I like my mom and my dad who actually got a computer and they kept on getting viruses. I don't know what they were doing on that. And as a kid, they're just like, here, fix this. And I was like, okay, like, and I started to explore, get a little bit knowledgeable on how to like scan for viruses, the software to download, how it all works. So I was able to like get rid of the viruses, but it seemed pretty interesting. So I think like over time, I got to learn a little bit more. And mind you, this is like when I was 13.
Mhm.
And like my mom didn't know how to like print stuff, so she was asking me to print stuff. She was asking me to clean the computer. She was asking me to do this. So over time, I got to know a little bit more about it. And I think the part about the viruses is what really sparked my interest because I'm like, how are people creating these things? And like, how do I, you know, clean off the computer? Because we couldn't afford Geek Squad. I don't think Geek Squad was a thing back then.
Not back then. Not you had to get Norton.
Yeah, or like I forgot what it is. I think like even Best Buy had something. I don't know whatever it was, but like we couldn't afford to bring our computer to get it fixed. So it was pretty much I had to figure it out. And I think just the process of figuring it out made me interested in it. And like I think from then I started to code really simple stuff, not anything too crazy.
And this is
It was
before like you actually learning tech in school. Like you started like learning a little bit of coding.
This was I would say like high school.
Okay.
To age myself, this is probably like 2002 or something. So I was just there like learning how to program. In English class, they made us write poems online on a website. So I think that's how it started. Is like I got like a website, and then I started to play around. I started like other students had like accounts, and it was like all the same passwords. I used to log into their accounts, mess with their shit. Um, and then, but yeah, overall, it was just like that's how I got into tech, pretty much. Just like exposure from like my mom and like fixing computers and like school, like building like websites to write out poems.
Hmm. So, because it's interesting. So even growing up in like a Haitian household, how did your parents like take to you saying, "Yeah, I want to go to college to, for computer science"? Like, is that something that they give you any pushback, or was it like they were accepting? How did it go?
Well, I am like a first generation immigrant, so my parents came from Haiti in their like late 20s. So the idea of going to college was just like a good thing for them. So I didn't get a lot of pushback. They just said, hey, is this like, do you think this is a good career? I said yes, and they trusted my opinion on it. Of course, they probably wanted me to go in the medical field, but I knew right away that wasn't for me. So I think just tech overall, they were just excited that I was going to like just going to college in general.
Okay. Okay. And what about your people around you, like your friends? Like, were there other friends like interested in the same thing, trying to do the same thing, or was it more so like, oh, Kenzley's a super genius? I know. Besides the fellas, I know the Philly fellas. We like, yeah, Kenzley's a super genius.
I would say, I would say no. Not. I think my friends just. I'm not sure they knew exactly what they wanted to do for the most part. Some of them went to college, like picking a career. Some went undecided. But I think like because I already did tech and software engineering in high school, and I was like super happy about it, and I knew what I wanted. They kind of knew that I was going to do that anyway. So
Okay.
like when he was going into college, I wasn't undecided. I already knew my major. I already knew kind of what I wanted to do overall. I didn't have an idea of like what company I wanted to go and work for. I didn't really know of Google per se as like a huge tech company until like in college or so, where I was trying to like look at the job market. I know I've used the search engine, but I didn't know how broadly they were going. I think
Right.
like they launched Gmail in like the year I graduated high school, and that's when they were starting to like build a lot of these user-facing apps. But before they just had Google search.
You never really thought of them as a company. Oh, I could work for them. Like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. So before I even get into that, so you went to college. What school did you go to? And I know I mentioned it, but just to confirm for the people, what did you study in college?
So I went to Stony Brook University out in Long Island, New York, and it's like one of the top-rated computer science programs in the state of New York. And I think, well, it was a fluke that I got there. I didn't really know it was the number one state school in New York. There's like a lot of asterisks to that, but it was very affordable, very good program. I studied computer science and applied math and statistics, and it was a double major, and I graduated with a BS, and then I continued and got a master's in computer science, and I specialized in computer security.
And you're saying you're not a genius, right?
Now, I think a lot of people who I know at Google have PhDs in physics. Way different than a master's.
So there you go. That's what I was going to ask you earlier. So you say some of these people that have like their PhDs in physics, like, they kind of do the same role as you, right? Now, those people who have their PhD in physics and you who has your master's, right? There's a little bit of a separation, at least like on paper, right? Do you feel a difference? Like, do you look at them and you're like, damn, these people are like way smarter than me, or they know more than me? Or do you feel like we kind of on an even playing field?
I would say most of the people within tech, we're all around the same playing field. And I think even like my manager and like his manager and the other people who are managers, it's like different backgrounds, but not necessarily like I don't think it necessarily plays a part into like your job level or your career level at all. I think as soon as you get into Google, it's not about like your level of education, it's how you apply it at work. So I know a lot of like PhDs who are at my same level at Google, and I know a lot of people who just have their bachelors who are just like leading Google Docs, like they're like pioneers. But I also know people who have PhDs who are at good careers too. So I think it has little to do with the degree and most about your application of the knowledge that you've attained over the past few years.
Because even me who's in tech, I'm not gonna lie, I want to work for Google bad, so that's my goal. But like when I think of Google, the thing that fascinates me, like, and it's probably not a real thing, but and you could confirm it or not, but I feel like it's a bunch of, and I when I say genius, I don't mean like what we see on TV, somebody who's way smarter than everyone, but somebody who's a genius at their craft, like they're really smart at what, really good at what they do, like they've mastered their craft. Not saying they know everything, but they're really good at what they do. And I picture a bunch of geniuses kind of bouncing ideas and knowledge off of each other. It's kind of one of those like, oh yeah, I've tried it this way. Why don't you try it this way? Oh, I've coded it this way. Why don't you try it? Oh, what if we did this? And it's kind of like ideas bouncing. It's kind of like that creative juice flowing, which allows y'all to be individual geniuses.
Got it. Okay. I would say Google is very much like that, where like because I also interview people. I actually had an interview today, and the one thing that we look for is that you like to be a software engineer and to come into Google, you have to know your shit. Like you have to know like how things work at a fundamental level because we're gonna quiz you on that. So a lot of my coworkers, they're very knowledgeable on, and so am I. Like I'm very knowledgeable on like the intricate details of like computer programming, and that's like key because if you want to build like very large, lasting systems, like very like huge applications, you want to make sure that the code that you're writing is correct. It's like, and not only like correct in the sense like it does what it's supposed to do, but it's very versatile. So if you wanted to change the system, it's not hard to change it. So like, and the thought process, I would say this, that goes into creating a large scale system at Google is like, it's very, very deep. It takes like, we're designing like a lot of details around software to make sure that it works. Because realistically, you're creating software that billions of people like run. And it touches, it's like across millions of computers, it touches billions of users. So you want to make sure that if you are coding something is up to par. You want to make sure that it's correct in the sense that it works, but also it's like the standard of which users expect it to work. Because because like everyone has high standards of like making sure that email works and Gmail works and stuff, and Google Docs work. So you want to make sure that we live up to users' expectations.
So with that, because I hear what you're saying there. So with that being said, how do you like so the Google culture? How is it? Because I've been at companies as a software tester, especially but when you come into a company like, for example, with the amount of experience that I have with software testing, they kind of expect a certain level of knowledge, professionalism, all that from you, right? Now, of course, with every job you get, you're going to be learning their culture and their ways of doing things. How is Google as far as let's say a junior dev or just a new dev in general comes in and they make a mistake? Is it one of those kind of things like, yo, we're Google, we don't accept that? Or is it one of those things, okay, let me show you where you kind of like went wrong here or how we could have done this better? Like, what is the culture over there?
Okay, great question. At Google, we have something that's called a blameless culture, generally. So, like, because we're touching code that runs on thousands of computers, and it affects millions of people, mistakes are bound to happen. So we don't necessarily blame the person; we blame the procedure. So if a person is able to make a mistake that brings down like servers, we want to make sure that the person isn't held responsible, but the procedure is. And we want to say like, what were gaps in our procedure that made it possible for one person to make this error? And
Right.
we try to correct it. So it's just like uh, so we try to make sure that the procedure itself is like ironed out so that there's bells and whistles in place to say like to prevent someone from making that mistake. But I trust me, there's been many times at Google, like I broken things,
Mm-hmm.
but we were able to catch that right away through our procedure. And like other like coworkers like made mistakes, and we were able to say like, hey, let's take a step back and say like, how could we have caught this earlier, and where what systems can we have in place that can be able to detect it much earlier than before it reaches production, before it reaches our users. So like, there's never been a time at Google where I have made a mistake or any one of my coworkers have made like a mistake that affected people and they were reprimanded.
Right.
It was more along the sense of like, oh crap, this should not have happened. How can we make sure that it doesn't happen again?
Right. Okay. Cool. So, one question I forgot to ask you earlier. So, you've been at Google for 9 years, but where were you before Google?
I worked for the Department of Treasury. I was a security IT specialist.
So, do you have like a cybersecurity background? Like, do you understand cybersecurity?
Yes, my master's was in computer security. So it was funded by the government, and nothing is for free. So the obligation was to work for the government on the same duration as my master's. My master's was 1 year, but I ended up working for the Department of Treasury for 2 years. And during that time, it was just mostly making sure no one hacked the IRS, because if you hack the IRS, you hack everybody.
Right.
So just make sure that the system is secure. Like firewalls, a bunch of firewalls across the board. The network systems or intrusion detection systems to make sure that they were picking up issues when we find them, and just overall protecting the network.
Okay. So, you got your master's in 1 year.
Yeah, it was MSBS, Master's, Bachelor's of Science, Master's of Science accelerated program. So
And
by design, it should
you
take
said
one
you're not a genius?
year.
All right, cool. As long as you know it. All right. So, question now that do you feel like that? Do you feel like school prepared you for your job with the IRS?
I would say kind of in the sense that it gave me fundamental knowledge, but I think that the role, like my job at the IRS, was very different. So it was more of it was there was a lot of programming. Well, there wasn't a lot. There was programming involved, but it was more of a security type of analysis role. And I think a lot of what I gained from that, I had done like very freelance. So it was basically like, and that role is very different from what I do at Google. So at the IRS, it's pretty much like how hackers think and how to prevent them from hacking our system. So in the case where you have an elite hacker and they're like giving malware to a person, we want to make sure that we're able to like deobfuscate that malware, or like because it's like encoded in a way, so we have to decode it. We have to see how it works, and we have to pretty much figure out which type of hacker take this is and be able to like prevent them from breaking into our systems. Those is slightly different. And where programming was involved there is we had a bunch of systems and they had APIs and we had internal code that would reach out to these systems and pull data through the APIs and aggregate them in some type of way. But mostly it was just like using that data to understand how our system is being used in a certain type.
Do you feel like the job at the IRS prepared you for Google?
Not really. I think it's different types of functions.
Mm-hmm.
It's still like tech, but it's like a different side of tech. One is related to like computer security,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is related to software engineering.
How did you prepare yourself to get to Google then?
Like I think more Google came from my college experience.
Okay.
Like my college experience was just like very heavy on coding, and it talked about the fundamentals of like algorithms and data structures and how to write clean, effective code. Whereas like the IRS was mostly strictly security. And even though we did software development there, it wasn't as like software development driven. So like we didn't do like normal practices that we would do at Google, for instance.
Okay. So at Google, what type of developer are you? Because there's like full stack, there's like back end and then a front end designer. What type of developer are you over there?
Yeah. At Google, my team is Docs infrastructure. So my team is like supposed to be a very back end team in the sense that like every common code throughout like Google spreadsheets, Google documents, Google presentations, that's what we handle, like very back end related code. But my team, or like what I do, is very full stack. I think that I'm like one of the few people within Docs infrastructure that does things across the board. So I've done like a lot of backend in the sense that I've written code that runs on the servers that send data to like the website that you see. I've also created UI components within Google Docs. Not a lot, but there's some that you'll see. I have also written code for mobile as well. So like if you have Google Docs on your iPhone, on your Android, I have written code, like more back-end code, but also front-end code as well. Like a few dialogues, a few like things, of notifications that you see. But for the most part, it's like what my team does is back-end infrastructure, but sometimes they have like small UI components to it that we have to code. But for me, it's just like I am very back-end in a sense, but I have worked on the complete stack of Google Docs.
Nice. So 9 years at Google, kind of a full stack, but should be mainly focused on back end. Started off as, I believe you said, as a software engineer 3. Now you're at a 5. What made you want to work at Google?
I think the reason why it first appealed, like how first Google appealed to me, is like during college, where I heard it was like one of the top companies to work at, primarily because they hire really, really smart people. So it was pretty much just like a competition to work there. So like, while I was in school and even while I was working at like in government, I was dedicated to like working there. But because I had my master's, I knew I had to go to government. But while I was working for the government, I was just like, okay, let me get it together. Let me study my ass off so I can be able to get into Google. And I think it's just also is like just working at a tech company. I like Google's philosophy. Its previous motto was like do no evil, but Google was like the pioneer of like trying to do really exciting projects. Because before I started, there was something called like Google Glasses, and then they discontinued that. But there was like the Loon project, and there was like the autonomous car or the self-driving car, and it was just like all these cool ideas and inventions that Google was really doing. So like I wanted to be a part of that in a sense. But even still, it's just like being at a big company where like the product is used by millions of people. I feel like I'm doing something very like good for people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, one of the reasons I chose Google Docs is because the philosophy behind it is to help users collaborate with each other, and it's a very free product, so everyone can use it. But also, of course, because it's Google, it's a business, and there's like enterprise versions of it, which is basically like the same as the free version, but you pay for support or something like that. But at least like I was able to give back to like people, and I think that's what really like makes my like me driven to like go to work and to continue to write code. But also, Google Docs is very like it's a great product in the sense that it's designed very well, it's built very well, and
Are you saying this because you helped create it or help build it?
yeah, it's all me actually. I think no, it's just like it's really smart people who do it. But it's just like because I worked and I've like written code for projects like during like freelancing where it wasn't that great. But I would say that like being around like because Google hires like people who know their craft, like looking at the code, seeing how well it's designed, it's such a great product. And I don't say that because I work there. I say that because I genuinely think so.
No, no, that's actually good to hear. So, but you said something here. You said you chose to work for Google Docs. Is that correct? Like like you had the option, or did you have other places you could have moved to?
During the interview process, what they do is they match you with the team. So I think there was like a few selection that I could have gone with. There was a few places within Google Drive, and then with Google Docs seemed pretty exciting.
So
Uh,
go ahead. So give me a little more detail when you talk about the interview process. Like, how did you get into Google? Like, what's that process like? You know, from I guess back then when you did it, because that was 9 years ago, and how much has it changed now?
I know that it's changed a lot, but I do not know the process currently. When I started, the first interview was actually in college because I think Google recruits at Stony Brook. So I think I went to a career fair
Mhm.
and new locations for recruiting near Stonecrest.
I'm crying.
Okay, Google stops. Yeah,
What is that?
okay. Yeah, I have a home at my in my office space. So it
Gotcha.
kind of, yeah, I said the G word too many times.
Gotcha.
Um, so my company recruits at Stony Brook, and the first time actually was when I was I think like a senior or something. And I remember the first interview, like I was so unprepared, like I completely bombed it, and I'm just like, oh crap, I should have done a way better job at this, because I think now looking back, like I know the answers,
Right.
but I think it was just like I guess in college I wasn't really that prepared, but also it was just like I didn't know as much as I know now. And then after that, I was just like I thought to myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to try like 20 times harder. I'm not gonna like just like know a little bit of tech. I'm gonna breathe tech. So I think like it was after I got so after I started working, I got another interview. I remember a recruiter reached out to me through LinkedIn and was like, hey, I saw that you applied earlier and we're here to see whether you're still interested. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm interested. Uh, and I think like at that moment I was like, okay, give me. I was like, all right, here's my interview date. I set it like a month out, and then I like for that month I like studied my ass off.
So when you
And
say you studied your tail off, like what does that look like? What were you studying? Like what were you looking at?
so I think like previously what I did was so for Google interviews they primarily focus on data structures and algorithms, and depending on the track that you're going to go to, they also see whether you want to specialize in something, whether it's back end or front end, and whatever you specialize in, you have to know what that is. So I primarily said back end, so my interview was in Java, and what they do is they want to make sure that you know algorithms and data structures. So I remember there's this thing called Coursera.
I know
Uh,
Coursera, yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and I think this was way back when they first started. And I took this class called Analysis of Algorithms by, I forgot his name, but he was like the Stanford professor. And it was so good in the sense that he broke it down so easily. The course was great. It was like, it literally helped me understand so many things about algorithms that, like, even at a college level, because like I didn't understand, and it just like it helped me like understand better ways to like analyze a graph problem and to solve it. which is generally the thing, was just like how to solve these problems. But also, like the recruiter reached out to me at a point where I was already trying to like interview at places. So I had read a bunch of important books. One is the Analysis of Algorithms by Stephen Skinner, which is like one of the best books, and it's like recommended to all software engineers. But it talks about how to look at a problem and identify its solution. At least like looking at the tech world, because a lot of like things can be like problems can be broken down into like very fundamental ways. So like that was a great book. And then I also started. One of the things that really helped me is that I used to do this thing called Code Jam, which is pretty much just like a bunch of coding challenges. I think that there's other websites more geared to interviews, like Elite Code or
I
like
know
Crack.
Elite Code. Hmm.
But when I started, it was like I did Code Jam, which is just like a coding competition, but like the entry parts, the entry level difficulty ones were the ones that did ask for interviews. And I did them, I think in like C++, but just understanding how to break down the problem was the important part. But yeah, I think it was, that's how I kind of like prepared. Just make like rereading like all the books that I read, taking a few courses online to refresh my memory, and like really just coding and understanding the process a little bit more.
Were you one of those people? Well, because I watch some of these like YouTubers, and I'm watching it. Like some of these people are like sacrificing their friends and family. Like they don't go out, they don't do nothing. Like they're doing like hackathons, and like they just literally like block out the world to kind of like lock in so that they can like get into these big like like the Metas and the Googles and all of that. Were you like one of those people?
I wouldn't say that I cut everyone off, but I remember there were like I dedicated like several hours a week to make sure that like I would like pretty much how you would take a course
Mm-hmm.
and take a class. I pretty much that's how much time I dedicated. So it would be like a few times a week I would spend like 2 hours a day like refreshing on it every day, or probably like every day I do a computer science problem, and probably do twice, like two in one day or something. And then like I dedicate time over the weekends to learn. So this was just more like a month long of like refreshing and learning. And even before that, I was still like reading books to make sure that I could understand. Because analysis of algorithms, that book, you can't read it over the course of like a week. That was like a 2 month process, for instance.
Okay. So I really wanted to ask you this question, especially now that I hear all your experience at Google, how it's been working at Google, how you got into Google and all that. How do you feel? How do you feel as a Black man working at Google? Like, because I've worked in the tech space, and I've been at companies where I'm like, oh, I'm fully comfortable here, and then I've also worked at companies where I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel like the outsider here, all eyes on me. They're just waiting for me to fuck up some code here.
I would say that like I feel that at Google, uh, they do they make an effort to try to make everyone feel included. So there's like diversity and inclusion committees to make sure that Google is like recruiting like people, and they have a lot of outreach programs. That being said, it's just like there are very few Black people at Google. I think, and
Yeah,
I
you
think
said
that's
few. You said few.
few. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
don't know. According to YouTube, it seems like it's a lot of Black people getting into Google now.
yeah, YouTube can say whatever they want. That's the internet. But I think it's just like the demographics are tend to not include a lot of people of color. But I guess it also depends what you mean by people of color. But I would say like in terms of Black people, there are not a lot of like Black people on my team. So because I think like percentage wise, so we're talking about percentages. So in the case where Black people is like 10 to 12% of the American population, within Google, I like on my team as a software engineer, I think it's less than that. I think it's yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but it's not 10 to 12. Um, but I do commend Google for having these communities to try to recruit more people of color and more Black people at Google. But I would say like there's always room for improvement.
And I wondered, and that's one of the reasons I kind of started this podcast because it's the same thing with me, right? When I got into software testing, every company I worked at, I was probably, if not the only, like most of the companies I worked for, I was the only African American there. Like I was the only black guy there, and after a while, I started realizing I'm like, wow, this is kind of boring. Like like I go to lunch by myself. Sit at my desk kind of by myself, don't really got nobody to talk to that kind of understands the things that I watch or anything like that, right? And that's why I started like teaching and all of that, and that's why I feel like with companies like Google, especially with companies like Google, because even you stated that when you were in college, like you didn't well, a little bit before college, you didn't even think about, even though you were using Google, you didn't ever think that it was something that, oh, I could work there, I could possibly be there. And I wonder if that's the like one of the reasons now it's like people don't really know, still don't know too much about IT. Because when people come to me for my program, they literally like nervous, like, and I'm like, you don't even have to learn coding for what I do, and you're like shaking in your boots. People are like really terrified, especially I know coming up from Philly. When people hear tech, they automatically, like I said earlier, go to, oh, that person's a genius. You got to be a genius, or that you got to be weird to know that stuff. So I wonder if that kind of plays a big role in that as well. People are kind of scared. Like the people who did break into the tech, they look at Google like, I'm not gonna make it there.
Yeah, I would say that I think the demographics of people like black people in tech was really low as well. I remember in college, I think in the class of like 100 or so, there was also how many of us were there? I think there were like five black people,
See?
um, and I think like growing up too, it was just like I think what I mentioned before, like coming from a Caribbean household,
Hmm.
yeah, the motivation was not to go into tech. They
Right,
motivated
right, right.
into like you know the medical field, which isn't surprising because you see a lot of Caribbean people who are nurses.
Right.
Uh, so I would say like yeah, it plays a part into that where and I think also in Black America, there's not a lot of emphasis on going into like tech and math and science. And I know a lot of my black friends in college, they were in like business or administration or like
Hmm.
other of like those type of fields. And I think like yeah, not a lot of black people I knew were in the like STEM programs, like science, technology, and math.
Got you. So you've been there for 9 years, so and I mean, I personally know your life a little bit because nobody ever know. You're like Carmen Sandiego. Nobody ever knows where Kenzley is. He could be here one day, gone the next. How would you say the work balance life is over there? Because for me, I'm not gonna lie to you, that's like a big like part of why I want to work somewhere. If I get there and I don't have a good work balance, I don't care how much they're paying me, I'm probably gonna end up leaving.
Right. I think Google is one of the most like lax places I've ever worked at. Uh, to give an example of this is that I remember I came from government where to go to see a doctor, I had to take a sick day. So I didn't go to my annual and because I went to my annual, I had to take a few hours off because I were to go there. And that's not a sick day, but like I had to take off like 4 hours to see the doctor and
Hmm.
come back sick time. And I remember at Google, I remember talking to my manager. I was like, hey, I need to take like 4 hours of sick time. And he was so confused. He was like, are you trying? And I was like, no, I'm going to the doctor. And he was just because you're sick or I don't get it. He was like, my annual. And he's like, oh yeah, he's like, you don't take sick time. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, you just go to the doctor? He's like, yeah, I'm back. That's it. And I was like, oh, okay. And like that was literally like the environment. It was just like as long as you get your work done, it's like everything is cool. So it's like if you need time to out of your day to run errands or like get things or do personal stuff, it's totally fine. And I think it's just more like everyone has like meetings, everyone has obligations, everyone has like tasks. As long as you do those tasks, as long as you do like what you're expecting, like everything is fine. So there's no I think like there's different companies that are more known for out like really working their employees.
Hmm.
I think at Google like it's very lax. And I would say like there are a lot of people who work hard because they're very motivated to work hard, but I've never had like my manager would tell me and say like, you must do this by this date
Right.
or it happens to you.
Right.
Or but this been like, hey, like this is the project, and I give my estimates and I say how long it's going to take, and that's how it goes. And even when the projects that I lead, I don't necessarily tell someone to do it by this date. I'm always just like, hey, like what are your expectations? When do you think will be done and such? But I think it's just more like at any company, or I guess not at any company, but like most companies, they're very liberal and you're just like, here, this is your task. But like if you don't do the task, there's like repercussions because like I think like Google is a company and they're paying software engineers money
Mm-hmm.
to do the thing. So it's like there is a sense of I guess like urgency in a sense. Like you want to make sure that because you are like Google is paying you to do this work, but there's no like I guess like Big Brother looking over your shoulder.
They
Like,
treat you like an adult.
huh?
I said they treat you like an adult. They expect you to just take your job serious.
Yeah, yeah, of
We're
course.
giving you this. We're trusting you with this freedom. You do what you need to do, and then we won't
Yeah,
bother you.
pretty much.
So do you feel like, because I worked at companies where I felt totally opposite of this, but with all this downtime, do you feel like Google's one of those companies where I can have a full-time job at Google and still have like my side hustles, like still have other business ventures that I go into still working at Google? Because I've worked at companies where it's like the amount of workload that they give me and the time that they give me to do this work is no way I have time to do anything else.
Uh, I think it matters on your level. Um, I think the more senior you are, the more responsibility you have, and the less you can have outside ventures. One thing I would say is that, especially for big companies like Google, um, is that if you're a software engineer, it's very difficult for you to have other software engineering side gigs.
Right, right,
Uh,
right.
because as an employee of Google, any software that you create, the intellectual property belongs to you.
Okay, I
Um,
didn't know that. Even outside hours.
correct,
Okay.
correct. And that's because Google has a lot of products, and they want to make sure that you, as a software engineer, will not create software using Google's information that could lead
Mm,
to.
mm,
But like that said, is like you can get I guess like approval to work on something. Like one of my old coworkers, what she did was she like just like exploring code and she like created games on the side. But she asked Google for permission for her to retain the intellectual property of that game.
mhm.
Uh, but that's like for software. I think software is a very particular case because as a software engineer, Google gives you a lot of software engineering knowledge, and they want to make sure that you do not compete or you do not create competing products while working at Google. But I know a lot of people who do work at Google who have like other side businesses that do not pertain to software.
Gotcha.
Like people are landlords.
Mhm.
Some people run like various other types of companies, but for the most part, like I know one of my coworkers is doing like in a collaboration with another bunch of people, but they do flips for houses.
Okay.
Other people run like event spaces. I think that's very typical. Um, but I think it's just fun. It depends, like how much time you have. But if you work your 9 to 5 or whatever the case, and you get your stuff done, I think that there's a lot of freedom with what you can do outside of work.
So you've been at Google for 9 years. How long ago did you graduate college, Ken?
Oh, good question. Oh wow, you're really trying to age me. Like 12 years ago.
That's all. Okay. So now times have changed a little, right? I'm sure back when you were in college, if they were around, they weren't as popular as they now are now. And I'm referring to boot camps, right?
Yep.
As somebody who did it the traditional way, who went through college, got your master's, had a first job, then went to Google, did a little bit of studying on your own, whatever the case may be. How do you feel now about like boot camps and people who are like, learning this stuff in like 6 months, 11 months, 12 months, and then boom, they're software developers. Are you like one of those like retired basketball players who are like talking about this new generation, or are you like welcome? Or you like it? You like, dang, I wish they had that back when I was growing up.
Got it. Okay. I think that boot camps are great for a particular type of purpose. So one of the like grievances that I have with boot camps is that they teach you how to code. Like really like they teach you like say the client wants to create this website, they'll teach you how to do the website from top to bottom. But I think what they kind of miss is a lot of the fundamentals of computer science. So like data structures and algorithms are like a huge part of it to get into Google, and a lot of the boot camps don't really offer that type. Or I guess I don't know because I haven't done a boot camp, but the people that know who have done boot camps, I don't think they have said that they go into like the data structures and algorithms part. But I think that like for like 99% of what I do, like coding wise, I am not there thinking about like like the fundamentals of computer science while I'm building a website. So I think like for most websites and for most things, having someone coming from the boot camp is super like easy and straightforward. And I have known people who like this is like amazing, where one person in particular, she was I think an English teacher, and then she did a boot camp for about I think like 6 months or so,
Mm.
and then I think she went a few places, but like now she works at Adobe, and I heard like other people who did a boot camp, and now they make like 6 figures working at like I think Mastercard or something like that.
I think that's so dope. I love a teacher went from teaching to literally like tech. I think that's so dope.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think it's just like it's just like I said, it's less about like your background and your degree, and most about how you apply that knowledge. So, like I know one of my coworkers. I don't know what he is now, but when I was this is a couple years back, and he was like a higher level than I am.
Mhm.
Like he didn't go to college at all, and I think his company got acquired by Google, and he basically just became like a lead within Google without any type of formal education. And it was because he has proven himself in that old company and within Google. And like I said, it's like it's less about like your education and what about like what you know for software engineering. Only for software engineering. That's what I can speak for because as a software engineer, I know that field. For other things within Google, it's kind of like a mystery.
And like, have do you know of or have you personally like helped hired anybody like from boot camps? Like, does Google is Google into that?
So I do not. So the people that I've known from boot camps or like friends of friends, where they haven't directly asked me to a referral, but I have interviewed several people who worked who have attended a boot camp while and they applied to Google and I interviewed them.
How'd that go?
Usually not very well.
Okay. And do you think it's because of what you just stated earlier that now that like fundamentals, that knowledge, or that learning about algorithms and all of that? Do you think that's due to that?
Correct, correct.
Okay.
So when I interview people, most of what I do is ask them data structures and algorithms, like the fundamentals of computer science. But I like phrase it in a way. But I think it's just like, but I don't get a lot of boot camp interviews because it's like pretty much spread out. And so for most, I think there was like probably like two, and I don't remember them doing so well. But then again, it's just more like, I've heard many good things across. But I've also had people from like Ivy Leagues, and they didn't do well either. So it's just like, I don't necessarily think it's because of like the distribution of
Hmm.
people not doing well is across the board.
No
Um,
matter what.
yeah, but actually no, I do remember this one person in particular. I think because of confidentiality, I can't say like
Right, of course, of course.
things. But this one person in particular did really well, uh, and they came from. I believe they didn't have a tech background, and I think they came from a boot camp. But I remember them having like just rocking the interview. but I forgot, to be honest. But I definitely, I don't know which boot camp, but I do remember them not coming from a tech background. Like the degree wasn't in computer science.
So as a seasoned developer, especially at Google, somebody like myself, for say, who's in a boot camp, right? Done the boot camp, goal is to work at Google, right? And of course, I don't plan on just directly applying to Google right after boot camp. I plan on getting my feet wet other places and then eventually applying to Google. What do you suggest a person like that, somebody like me, what do you suggest they do so that they don't come across like somebody like you interviewing and you're kind of you liking what they're saying about coding and all that, but you can sense that they have that, like they're missing that fundamental? Because I'm assuming your thing about knowing the fundamentals and your thing about knowing about algorithms, all that is because of the way the people that work at Google, including yourself, the way you are, like you think. You're able to use these algorithms, to use these fundamentals to think outside of the box to solve problems. Like, is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that like because we know like a lot of my coworkers and I, we know software engineering, we're very critical of it. So I would say that for people who want to get into that space, get into Google or get into like a top tech company, the key is to like know your craft. So in the case where, and also like know like fundamentals, you like gotta know it. And it's just like it's like going. I remember I did Coursera to refresh my memory, and that was like phenomenal class. So I would be like just like take a class on like data structures. There's like a bunch of books that are recommended. I remember, I remember my recruiter was so helpful. She was just like, here's a list of resources, and it was just like a bunch of books that would help. And they're just like, and I remember like reading through those books. But there's like, I think like if you want, I could send you that list. You can include it in like this YouTube or
Yeah, I'll
however.
definitely put it in the description for everyone.
Yeah. And like literally it's just like these are the things to study. There's like a bunch of books, a bunch of courses, a bunch of material. And like know it like you know the back of your hand. Um, and the one important thing that helped me is just like actually practicing problems. Because like you said, like Elite Code, I've never used it, but I think that's what's heavily recommended now is just like going through solving, doing practice problems. And then one of the things that I thought was pretty neat was that I guess before this was a thing, where when I interviewed at Google, I used to just have a whiteboard, and I used to just like go on the whiteboard and like write everything out. But now they have like computers, so you can type things out. But just like pretending to be in the interview state of mind, like pretending somebody asks you this question and you have like 30 or 45 minutes or an hour to solve it, and then like see how you did, see how far you got, and just like critique the crap out of your thing, and see like the solution and see how yours differ from the solution and see exactly like how to improve your coding style. And I think that's key. Is just like to get into Google would be like making sure you practice interview questions and understanding how it works on a fundamental level. Staying at Google is about making sure you know good software engineering principles. And also don't be afraid to ask questions. Because I remember like my first 2 weeks at Google, I was asking really simple questions to my mentor. I was like, how do you turn on this program? Like how do you find a bug? And then like literally he was like so helpful in teaching me to the point where like after I was able to learn all of that, I like contributed massively to the code base. So it was just more like don't be afraid to ask questions. Like getting into Google, there's like the imposter syndrome. But getting your foot into the door of Google is like making sure you know your craft and working, I guess, hard to get there, or just making sure that you're knowledgeable.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because like for my boot camp, I had like right now I'm learning like HTML and CSS, and I created like basic HTML document, and something was like incorrect in my code. Like it wasn't like the page like wasn't coming out the way like it was supposed to for my assignment, and I was just like baffled, and I'm like I in my mind at least, like I read through that code several times, and I couldn't see what was wrong with it. So then finally, I think that on the next page, they like give you like the pretty much the answers to the code, how the code should look. And I went, and it was like the smallest thing in that code. Like it was the fact that I think I like it was code, it was cap sensitive, and I was capitalizing the letters, and it was just that simple. And I was like, yo, like I remember that night, I was just like, I'm going to sleep because if I can't figure this out, coding's not for me. Like it was just like that difficult. So I understand what you mean about being able to solve those type of problems in those scenarios. So you've been at Google for 9 years. You've been out of school for 12 years. What would you say? I would say predominantly at Google, but if it's at the IRS, that's cool too. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned?
You mean just at a professional level?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say the biggest lesson that I've learned overall is fail fast. What I mean by that is don't be afraid to take risks. And sometimes they work out tremendously well, sometimes they don't. But I think in tech, things are moving very fast. And what you want to do is you want to make sure you try a lot of options. Um, and like till this day, I'm just like, that is such a good idea. Uh, just like if you have an idea for a project you think is going to be impactful, and uh, and you want to like just see or like just like investigate whether it would be impactful, it's always good to just start the preliminary things to see whether it would be impactful. And then, but that's more of like how I am in my stage of my career. And then just like making sure that you test it, and if it doesn't work out, you evaluate it very quickly, and you know that it doesn't work out, so you move to something else. But it's basically like exploring ideas and making sure that you test things that you think would be a cool idea.
So I'm glad you said at this stage of your career. So what's next for you? Cause there or like are there some goals that you can share with us that like like hey, I'm working towards this, or I would like to do this one day, or any future goals you can share with us as a software developer, as a software engineer?
I think that life is very dynamic, and I like to, I don't know, just keep my options open. So I think that there are a lot of things that I want. Like I want to improve as a software engineer, but also as like a people manager. I want to make sure that like I lead a great team. Um, but then again, like I have no idea what the future holds. So I like to just take it week by week or month by month.
All right. Last question before we do our rapid fire, right? For anybody who's watching this and they've been thinking about or they're about to get into tech or they want to become like a developer. Actually, no, I'm lying. This is not the last question. I'm gonna put that aside, right? I'm gonna put that aside, right? I got a different question that just triggered a different question for you real quick. Hold on. Because I got a thing of questions for you. Yeah, but no, I can ask that question. I can ask you this question. So what would you suggest to somebody or matter of fact, that's the question I was gonna ask you. If you were not in tech now and you were going to jump into tech with everything that you know now, what route would you take? Would you go back to school? Would you do one of these boot camps? Would you try to learn it on your own? But all the resources that are available now compared to 12 years ago when you were first learning, what route would Kenzley take now?
Okay. I would do a boot camp. Um, I think it's so. So what I would do actually is I do a boot camp so that I could learn how to code, but also learn on my own. And then if I wanted to further my career, as soon as I got a job in coding and I'm actually doing coding, I would have the job pay for my master's. So like if I didn't do like tech or anything like that, and I did something like a math teacher or like not even a math, but if I did like English, like as my friend did, like what like her career was just like boot camp, got into a job, how the job paid for her master's, got a master's in like computer science, and just work on that. Um, I think that would be a good approach. But realistically, if you have if you already did a boot camp, you have that knowledge and working at a company, uh, like just having that experience is good enough because they'll hire you solely on experience. But I think some companies are very much like education driven, so they like having a degree in tech uh, puts you a little bit further.
I
Uh,
had one job, Kinsley, that told me like they didn't even care what my degree was in, just have a degree. I was like, well, I don't want to work for you guys. Y'all just hiring anybody with a degree. Like,
yeah, I think it's kind of odd like that. But I think it's just more like as long as you know you know your craft, you're good. But yeah, but some companies are just like you have to have a degree in something. I guess that's pretty much what I would do if I went to like further. But it also depends because like if I had a company to pay for my degree,
mhm.
I'd get like I get like an MBA, which literally means nothing. But companies look at it and they're like, oh, you know a lot. Yeah. So
All right. So before I do the rapid fire, I got to ask you a hot seat question. This is a hot seat question, right? Not now, but when you first started working at Google, roundabout, how much were you making? Roundabout. Don't have to be exact, but we're talking about 9 years ago.
9 years ago, it has changed dramatically. I started off making 130. No, sorry, 110. 110 base, and then I forgot the rest. I think there was also like sign-in bonus, a regular yearly bonus, and stocks.
Did you
But
negotiate that stuff? Or you just like, man, I got into Google, just give me whatever?
I negotiated some things. They and like mind you, oh, what I did actually was I had a competing offer. No, I didn't have a competing offer. I was accepted to interview at Facebook, and
Hmm.
then I told Google that, and they're just like, okay, we don't want you to interview at Facebook. You can stop. We'll give you. I was just like, okay, that works for me. And then I think I was just like, what about if we give you this? And they're like, okay, fine, we'll give you that. But it was pretty much like that. I forgot exactly the total compensation, but it was just like it was like a good 6 figures.
Okay. And then another hot seat question is and remember, I text you this. I was like, I'll just wait to ask you this. Is it unlimited PTO?
No, it is not.
So how does the PTO work at Google? Because I know you said you have a lot of, time to do personal stuff. So how does the PTO actually work?
Well, it depends about your tenure at Google. But I get like I think starting off you get 20 days a year, which is a lot, and then I have like 25, which is just like what is that? 6 weeks? 5 weeks? 5 weeks? Or is it 5 weeks? I forgot how much I have. No, yeah, it's 25. So it's like 5 weeks where it's like my PTO, but they roll over. So I remember this year I was at the max, so I had to take off, otherwise I lose it. And I think that's the incentive because a lot of companies who offer unlimited PTO, like people feel like they kind of like don't want to take it. So I think Google, they're just like, all right, you get like 5 weeks, and you must like it's at a cap. So like after like 30 or 40 days, like that you accrue, you have to start using them. So it forces people to actually take their PTO.
Okay.
But I think what we have at Google, I think, but I'm not sure, is we have unlimited sick. So like, I forgot actually. We might not have, but I've heard that has a thing, but I'm not sure anymore.
Okay. All right. So this is going to be the rapid fire questions. I'm just going to ask you, I'm going to give you a couple options and you just have to pick the first one off the top of your head. And then I give you about like 30 seconds or so to just to explain why you chose that, right? To your answer.
Okay, got it.
So first one, I'm going to ask Java or JavaScript.
I would say Java.
Why?
Okay, because well, my first language is JavaScript, and I like it a lot. But with Java, I would say it's more backend. So it's more structured in the sense it runs faster. It allows you to do like backend systems. But I guess JavaScript also. But I'd much rather prefer Java because it's like object oriented more so than JavaScript.
Somebody without a tech background trying to get into tech, should they focus on front end, back end, or full stack?
I would say full stack. It's always good to know how the whole system works overall.
Okay. Remote or in office?
I, for myself, prefer to be in office because Google has free food and I love free food. So
Do you pause in the rapid fire? Do you feel like you're more productive at home or in the office?
I think it depends. During the pandemic, I was tremendously productive at home. But now that I'm in the office, I think it really depends. Like, if I have something that I really, really need to work on and I don't need any distraction, I prefer to work from home and just like silo myself in my office where I am now and just work on it. But if it's more collaborative, where I need to attend meetings, I need to like see people, I think it's so much better to do in the office because you have that face to face.
Okay, okay, cool. Me, I haven't been in office in 2 years. Google is probably the only company that could get me to come into an office. Like I just can't do it. Light mode or dark mode?
I like dark mode because I work. I guess like during the day, light mode. During the night, dark mode.
I'm not gonna lie to you, Kenzie. If you had said light mode, I would have judged you. Like only serial killers use light mode. Mac or PC?
I personally prefer PC.
Why?
Uh, well, I guess the reason why is that it's a personal choice, uh, but uh, a lot of software for development runs well on PC. And I think with Mac, there were like things that like you have to pay for because you know.
You gotta go the extra mile.
Yeah, because they're like you bought a Mac, so you can buy all these other things. Like, I'm a broke college student back then, and I was just like, you know what? So like on my PC, I have like a bunch of free tools that I have. So none of the things that I have for development, like I paid for.
hmm Now, because I've been learning about coding, this is a question I developed for you literally while I was doing one of my trainings in boot camp. Internal style sheets or external style sheets?
Wait, what?
In internal style sheets or external style sheets when you're using CSS?
Oh, okay. External, obviously.
External, okay, all right.
Well, actually, it depends, but mostly external.
Okay. All right. All right. Apple or Android?
I have an iPhone.
So are you saying you take Apple over Android?
I would say I would take an iPhone over an Android.
That's interesting because I would have, because you like PC, I thought you would like rock out with Android as well because it's similar.
Well, a PC, well, it depends type of PC, but I like iMessage because that's the one thing that I can't say that. But Apple did it really well, so I guess.
We'll talk about that one this weekend though. The rest of the statement that you were gonna say, we'll talk about that later. I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask it. Xbox or PlayStation?
I like Xbox because of Halo.
No, okay. All right. Boot camp or college now?
I would say boot camp now if I didn't have the collegiate background.
Nowadays, we're in 2022. Degree or no degree?
I would say it helps to always have a degree.
Okay, so you're going with degree. All right, so that means you're going to be on another episode because I want to have the discussion with a group of people who are like 50-50, right? 50% say no degrees, 50% say degree. I mean, I'm gonna invite your cousin Herman to that one because he's on both sides, but he's mainly no degree.
See, I just want to like give a caveat to this is
hmm
that like I think no matter what you, as long as you have the knowledge to do it, it works. But the issue is that there are companies out there who do not care whether you know this stuff, is they look for a degree. So it's just like you could be like the best software engineer in the world. Like if you give your resume in and another person who has like a PhD who gives their resume in, and even though you're a better coder, you do better things than this person, they'll still say, oh, this person went to like has this PhD and stuff. So I think it's just more like at a certain point, it's just like you have to be like well known in like your establishment. But to get your foot in the door, it's easier when you have a degree. And I think that's the only reason why. It's because like I personally I don't care what your background is, but I know that companies look at that.
Okay, that's it for rapid fire. I do have one last request of you, and I actually got this idea from a podcast that I watch, All the Smoke. with two basketball players, Matt Barnes and Steve Jackson. Shout out to Steve Jackson. If you could think of somebody off the top of your head that you think would be beneficial to this podcast, who would it be? And this person has to be somebody that you can actually connect me with. Like, hey, Greg, this is such as us. Hey, such as us. This is Greg. He has a podcast. I think you'd be amazing on it. It could be somebody from Google. It could be somebody from any walk of life that you know, but related to tech that could help the people out. Because the goal of this podcast is to get these questions out there that most people want ask somebody like you guys or us, like who are in tech, to kind of encourage, especially our people, to get into tech. Because we can do it, they're just kind of scared of it. So I'm kind of trying to open that door for them. So if you got somebody, who would it be?
Okay.
And remember, I hold you accountable to it.
Yeah. I am thinking of one person, and you were talking about like someone who is so like one of my friends. She's a woman, the one that I mentioned. But I think if we're looking,
and I'm sorry, wait, the person does not have to be a developer. They just have to be in tech. So even if they're a project manager, a scrum master, a business analyst, you know, like design, they don't have to be only like back. They could be back end, front end, tester, whatever the case is.
Okay. So I am going to shout out to one of my coworkers and my friends. I would say her name is Ashley, and I would say she's a UX designer.
Even better.
And then like it's not necessarily like a software engineer, but she's in that tech space. So I think that would be a great connection.
All right, cool. This weekend I will be hounding you down about Ashley. Cool, perfect. Kenz, I want to thank you for taking the time out today to be the first on the episode. You know, I'm always texting you, bothering you, because one day I will work for Google. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. You working at home tomorrow, or you in the office?
Oh, I am in the office.
How far is it for you?
It's like 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay. Is that why you chose where you chose? Like it's not that far, not that bad?
Yeah. So like my area is pretty chill. Like,
so there's two things you promised me. You promised me that you would connect me with Ashley, and you also promised me a tour of Google, because I need that tour of Google on my vlog. So we're gonna set that up. All right, then, Kenz, you have a good night.
You too.
All right, bro.